Palestinian people. The Palestine liberation struggle, as we all know, is part of a wider struggle against imperialism. And of course, against now what are a whole lot of reactionary regimes in the Middle East, in West Asia, who collaborate especially with US imperialism. Hamas is a vital part of that struggle, the anti-imperialist struggles of peoples worldwide, of which the Palestinian struggle is one. At the outset, I want to make this distinction, and I think it needs to be made. We usually say that we are anti-Zionists. Zionism. The ideology that informs whatever Israel has done beginning 1948 comes from a colonialist and a racist ideology. An ideology that has denied rights to the Palestinian Arabs, dispossessed them. They have been expelled from the territories of Palestine, a whole lot of Palestinian Arabs. So we are anti-Zionists, but that does not mean that we are anti-Semitic, anti-Semitists. We are not anti-Jewish. Anti-Zionism is not the same as Israel today claims to speak, and it claims that its brutal actions against Palestinians are being carried out in the name of the Jews of the world. Actually, Israel endangers the humanism of all Jews, all the Jews of the world. It poisons their identity as Jews. I say this because my mother was a Jew. My mother, Jean Abrahams, was a Jew. And that is why I protest against it on behalf of the Jews of the world. Israel has been an occupying force in Palestinian lands. It refuses to treat the Palestinians as equals. This is not a war of Hamas, between Hamas and Israel. This is a war by Israel, subjugated and contained. Israel is fighting to destroy Palestine. I say this because if it was merely, dismantling these tunnels, and in the latter half of what I will speak, I will do that. So let me now go to provide a kind of a historical perspective to what is happening in Gaza. This goes back actually nearly 100 years. 1917, British military occupation of these lands west of the River Jordan, the ousting of the Ottoman Empire, Britain obtained a mandate from the League of Nations, and it took this mandate. You can see what the British imperialism did in 1917. Basically, they promised the Zionists a home in Palestine. That's what the Balfour Declaration did, taking advantage of the mandate obtained from the League of Nations. As you all know, actually, there has been, and especially from Central and Eastern Europe, right since the end of the 19th century, immigration. And this immigration, peaked with the rise of Nazism, fascism, especially to Palestine, after both the United Nations and Britain, started restricting immigration of Jews to the United States and to the UK. 1947, the UN sanctioned the partitioning of this area west of the River Jordan into two separate states, one Jewish state and the other Arab. But the Zionist leadership proclaimed the state of Israel in May 1948. They took advantage of this UN sanctioning of the partitioning. What followed was a war between the state of Israel and most Arab states. The Arab states suffered a humiliating defeat. And in fact, after the truce, the boundary lines that the UN had proclaimed, those very boundary lines changed. There were two major wars later on. One was the 1967 Six-Day War, and again in October 1973, in the world's biggest prison. Slow death in the world's biggest prison. To bomb Gaza. There's a total disproportionality as between the deaths in Gaza and the deaths in Israel from Gaza. Negotiations. There's been a 72-hour truce, after which again this bombing has resumed. Egypt. One has to keep in mind that the present Egyptian regime, as you know, in Egypt, in July last year, July 2013, there was an army coup in Egypt. And the present regime in Egypt is totally hostile to Hamas. Coup in Egypt in July last year removed the Muslim Brotherhood from power. Duly elected Muslim Brotherhood from power. So Egypt, which is at the center of these negotiations, is totally hostile to Hamas. According to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, I'm talking of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, on the ground in Gaza, literally no safe place for civilians. And yet this Modi government It's really, and I'll not mince words, it's providing a justification for Israeli war crimes. It has a strategic alliance with, as you know, India has a strategic alliance with US imperialism. So along with US imperialism, and John Kerry, the Secretary of State, was last week here in Delhi, and they issued a joint statement. Sushma Swaraj, the Foreign Minister, and John Kerry, Secretary of State of the US, issued a joint statement. And that statement, if you read it, about Gaza, the section on Gaza, it literally says Israel has the right to defend itself. It doesn't say Hamas or the Palestinian people have the right to defend themselves against this whole technological military industrial complex